And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Wednesday, January 29th. I am Josh Engleman here to break down a 9-game slate on both sites, actually. So I should probably mark off those extra 2 games in my sheet while I talk this through. So we got 9 on DraftKings, 9 on FanDuel for tonight, and it is a sprint once again. 3 games locking at 7, 4 games locking at 7:30, 2 games locking at 8, and then we're just done. So I love it. I like these kind of sprint slates. You guys are going to want to be on playback tonight because we are absolutely going to get a lot of news during that show. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman. It's going to be a good one tonight, folks. Going to be a good one. DFS PhD got 8th in the main with Amin Thompson. Yeah, I guess not the best night for old Amin last night. I did not play. Went out for some food with the wife last night after I got done my show. Big day at a Denny, I guess. Oh, wow. Really low scoring night. Big one out of Pods. I guess Steph got ruled out. Late scratch, that's fun. That's always good. Milwaukee dumps one to Portland. Gross. Lakers lost to Philly. Gross. Council smashed. Good. In 19 minutes, I might add. Fun stuff. Glad I missed that one. So the wife and I went out yesterday thinking the plan was we're going to get like pizza and wings. For some reason, the place that we went to last night was closed. It's never closed. Have no idea why. Next place we try to go to, absolutely packed. No seats at the bar. Next place we go to, absolutely packed. No seats at the bar. I don't know what was going on for Tuesdays. I guess people really wanted to watch Lakers Sixers or something. So ultimately, we end up at this restaurant that we haven't gone to much. It's beautiful on the inside. Huge. Not a single soul was in there while we got in there. I got this Calabrian chili shrimp linguine dish. Good God, was it awful. It was just straight fire broth. It was almost like Italian ramen. Just jet fuel hot with nothing else in it. God, it was terrible. What a letdown. What a letdown. But anyway, that was my night. We got basketball to talk about, that's for sure. And I think we're going to do that now. We got 9 games to break down. Let's break them down. Take a look at the rotation. Oh, yeah, S&P. I already saw that Bronny got some run yesterday. Couldn't make a bucket, but I guess it could have been worse. I like the idea of integrating him from time to time. That might not have been the time, but didn't work out. Yeah, Steven, I thought it was going to be great, too. I mean, it was terrible. Terrible. It was very clearly just like some sort of broth with hot Calabrian chilies in it. It was so thin. Like, it was almost like noodle soup. It needed 1/3 the amount of liquid and like a little bit of cream because like the sauce just never emulsified. God, it sucked. Anyway, let's break it down. AO in chat. Who's the worst team in the league? The Wizards. Not close. Although Brooklyn's working on it. And we're going to start with the Brooklyn Nets. And lucky for us, we're not going to talk about Brooklyn in any major way. We are, in fact, going to talk about the Charlotte Hornets on the opposite side. Brooklyn is the lowest owned team. Charlotte is the highest owned team. So this is a very real fun dynamic we've got going on here in this first one. Nets, 3-point dogs in Charlotte, 204.5 total. This is the lowest total on today's slate by 18 points. It's the lowest pace game by 2 full possessions. The only guy getting any interesting love from Brooklyn is 3% ownership to D'Angelo Russell. I have him 4% optimal, 8% boom, with a boom target of 42. We've been having these conversations about how target scores move. 9-game slate today, $6,600 D'Angelo Russell, projected for 29.5 fantasy points, needs 12.5 more points to hit his target score. And I think he has an 8% chance to do it. Brooklyn looks awful. I have no idea how you play anybody from this team. What the fuck is his name? Noah Clowney is out. Trendon Watford is back. So I don't know. None of it matters. That no team could look worse. They've got the lowest optimal, lowest boom, lowest ownership. The less we say about Brooklyn, the better. Charlotte, on the other hand, is the exact opposite scenario here because they're missing everybody. LaMelo sprained his ankle. He's out. Josh Green is out. Trey Mann obviously still out. Cody Martin out. Brandon Miller out. Salon with the G League team. Mark Williams out. So keep an eye on the Salon news because he's out right now. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets activated. They only have 9 bodies for today. It would make a lot of sense to me if Salon got activated and was with the team. He just isn't right now. So keep an eye on that because that will change some things here. But what we're creating with this shorthanded Charlotte team is immense ownership. We've got Josh Okogie right now, 4,300, small forward, power forward eligible, currently projected for about 60% ownership, and it's fully deserved. 22% optimal for me, 34% boom score at 31 fantasy point target. He's the number one contender today by a mile. The price is great. The position's great. He's going to have to play like 30 minutes. I don't know how you could possibly get away from him today. It's just the matchup is great. Other than the fact that it's a pace down spot for Charlotte, these guys have so many minutes and so much usage to go around that I don't know how you dodge someone like Okogie. Assuming he's in the starting lineup, which I don't know how he wouldn't be. I'd say the next priority for Charlotte is going to be Moussa Diabate. He's 3,700, center only. The only 2 bigs that they really have right now are Diabate and Taj Gibson. It's part of the reason that I think Salon could end up as well. Whether they start Diabate or bring him off the bench, you're going there regardless. Taj Gibson's going to have to play a decent chunk. They've tended to like start him and play him like 12 minutes from time to time. The way that I'm seeing it now, I went 19 to Taj because there's just no other place to put the minutes. And he's the flat 3K. Taj, you don't get to. Diabate, on the other hand, is 40% owned. I got him 16% optimal, 28% chance of 28 fantasy points, which is really all you'll need out of him at that salary. Diabate looks like an incredible value because he's going to have to play basically every minute at center that Taj Gibson can't play. Maybe they go a little small from time to time because it is Brooklyn on the opposite side. But even if you account for a couple minutes there, which I did 2, Diabate's just going to have to be out there. And he's not the worst per minute guy in the world either. So Moussa Diabate, big priority. Josh Okogie, big priority. Miles Bridges is like the only real basketball player left on this team. He's 8,200, power forward only. He's 25% owned. I would argue that's a hair over owned, but he is going to have the ability to do whatever he wants tonight. Every shot that he wants to take is his. So I get it. He should be getting ownership. He does look good. I'd argue it's a little extreme for this game environment. Then you get someone like Nick Smith, who kind of has to play 30 plus minutes now. He's been in the starting lineup for Brandon Miller. Shooting guard, small forward eligible, 5K. He's pulling 15% ownership. That looks great. Vasily Micic is likely going to be starting and getting 30 minutes at the point. He's 5,300 though. So a little bit less interesting. Only 7% owned, but definitely a like 10%er. No way to dodge that. And then you get into like all the guys that you don't really remember for Charlotte. Daquan Jeffries, is probably going to be a value play that you can use. Isaiah Wong is probably going to be a value play you can use. I find it hard to get to Seth Curry, but maybe today is one of those days he plays a ton of minutes. But we want to keep our eye on Salon, because if he ends up, that gives them 10 guys, and that really takes a bite out of like getting to Jeffries or Wong. But Charlotte's the most owned team. I've got them with the highest optimal. I've got them with the highest boom. That's what happens when LaMelo's out, Josh Green's out, Brandon Miller's out, Cody Martin's out. I mean, they're basically missing their entire starting five. Yeah, Steven, not out of the realm that Seth gets the start. I doubt it, just because of how small they are right now. I'm guessing that we get Micic, Smith, Okogie, Bridges, and one of Gibson or Diabate. But Charlotte's the priority today, folks. Make sure you're well aware of what you're getting here, because you're getting to Charlotte by default. For the Pistons, they are 6.5-point underdogs in Indiana, 229 total. This is like basically every total other than Brooklyn and Charlotte is mostly the same. Denver and the Knicks is 239. That's the high man here. But Detroit Indy is actually the fastest pace matchup that I have on this slate. Now, when it comes to ownership, we either have teams that are getting a little bit or teams that are getting not much, and then you have Charlotte. This is one of the teams that's not getting much. Same for Indy. Toronto, Washington in the next game are the teams that are going to get a little bit more ownership. So for Pistons, there's no ownership coming in here to anyone other than Jalen Duren. Duren is about 20% owned right now. He's 5,800. He bounces between playing 24 minutes a night and 32 minutes a night, and you never really know what you're going to get. When you get to 32 minutes, you're usually pretty happy about it. He's over a fantasy point per minute. I'd argue that he's a little over-owned. Remember, on these 9-game slates, we're going to have 18-plus legitimate center options. So when we get these guys that are like priced appropriately, I always find it pretty difficult to grab that ownership. There's always just going to be a guy in that range that looks similar. It's not that I don't like Duren. To me, he's just a guy. I like Cade, under-owned at 10,200 as a pay-up pivot, especially against Indy. I don't mind that at all. You know, like you can click on Tim Hardaway, but honestly, I'm probably overselling Detroit here. Only Cade Cunningham got to double digits in optimal. He's the only one that crossed 20% boom, but you need 60 out of Cade at 10-2. That's a big output. So I find it pretty hard to prioritize anything from the Pistons. I think your only focus is going to be on Cade, Tobias, Tim Hardaway, and Jalen Duren. But these guys are at full strength right now, minus Jaden Ivey. Their prices are sort of where they're supposed to be, and we've got better valued options throughout the rest of this slate. So there's not much here for me from the Detroit Pistons. And, you know, there's probably even less from the Pacers. Highest owned guy on DraftKings or FanDuel is 6%, either Turner on DraftKings, Siakam or Halliburton on the FanDuel side. You know, I got Siakam and Turner both to 10% optimal. So, you know, you can tell me that those guys are a couple percentage points under owned, but you need 40 out of Turner. You need 47 out of Siakam. You know, like both of these teams are like relatively fast-paced teams, but there's nothing really jumping off the page here. Andrew Nembhard is questionable for this game. That could affect, you know, minutes for Aaron Nesmith at 3,300, which could look a little bit more interesting if we end up with Mathurin or with Nembhard out. We could also, you know, see additional minutes. Like the problem is, even with these additional minutes, if they just get split between Mathurin and Shepard, McConnell and Walker, Mathurin, Nesmith, Shepard, and like Jarris Walker, I don't think we're going to end up looking at these guys with any sort of passion, even with Nembhard out potentially. So there's just not much in Detroit and Indiana. Now for the Toronto and Washington game, The Raptors are this is how bad the Wizards are. The Raptors are 7-point favorites in Washington, 231 total. Yikes. But we are getting a little bit more ownership here. We're getting 10% to Scotty Barnes. We're getting 20 to RJ Barrett. We're getting 10 to Jakob Poeltl. We're not really getting anything to anybody else. The minutes for Mitchell and Dick and Brown have all kind of normalized in the mid-20s. I do think RJ Barrett looks the best. I agree with the ownership he's getting. 17% optimal, 32% chance of 48 fantasy points, which would be his target at 7,800. I like the position. I'm obviously totally okay with a matchup against the Washington Wizards. RJ Barrett should be about 20% owned. I think Scotty Barnes looks good in that 10 to 15 range. I mean, these guys should have very little issue putting it on the Wizards. It's a great total. Second fastest game on the slate. You know, Jakob Poeltl's minutes have been a little weird lately, but they've crept back up over these past few games. He looks fine as like a 10% owned center. I just got a hard time going to anything other than Barnes, Barrett, and Poeltl. So if you're going to Toronto, you want the three best dudes from the Raptors. You don't need to go dumpster diving here, even in a nice spot against the Wizards. Now, the Wizards are actually getting a decent chunk of ownership here. They are the second most owned team on the slate, but it's just kind of spread out. 10% to Poole, 10% to Kuzma, 10% to Keyshawn George, 10% to Bub Carrington, 20 to Alex Sarr, and then like a little bit to Koulibaly. I don't think these guys look as good as their ownership, but like it's about right. Like they're all like just shy of 10% guys. I think Poole looks the best at 7,100. He's the best per minute guy on the team that isn't Joval. The usage is obviously there. His efficiency has been pretty good this year. You're not all that worried about Toronto. But we do need to watch the injury news on Alex Sarr. He is questionable today. If he happens to be out, we're probably going to be able to project a couple extra minutes to Joval. And at 5,400, he'll look like a pretty good play. You know, you'll be able to compare his price to Jalen Duren at that point. So Joval will pull a little bit of ownership if we end up getting Sarr out. But yeah, Bub Carrington, George, Kuzma, Poole. Poole is pretty clearly my number one guy. I can't separate Koulibaly, Kuzma, George, and Carrington. To me, they're all the same guy. And like a hair over-owned. I want a little bit less of Washington than the public does. But that will look a little different if we do get Joval starting in place of Alex Sarr. Let's go to game number 4, but before we do that, let's hit the schedule for the rest of today. Very easy to do for us here once I pull it up on my phone. It's a basketball exclusive day today. There is no NFL show, obviously. We've only got the Super Bowl left, and there is no NHL show today. So we've got the Deeper Dive, myself and Spags at 5 o'clock. We'll break down these 9 games. We'll have a bunch more news at that point. Greg and Eric will be back for Live Before Lock at 6. They'll get you ready for all the news that comes out in that ramp up to 7 o'clock. And then they'll probably be getting some of that 7:30 news around 6:50, which will get kind of hectic. So then live after lock on playback.tv/Stokastic, we watch games, we talk about ownership and late swaps and bets and all sorts of stuff. You guys can come pop in for an hour, totally free, playback.tv/Stokastic. Greg and I will be there for an hour, and we probably end up with some sort of special guest popping in as well. I got to plug in my phone. I didn't realize I wasn't charging it right now. There we go. Let's go to game number 4. Chicago Bulls, mild underdogs in this spot. Oh no, is that plugged in the wrong side? Nope, we're good. Bulls are 14.5-point dogs in Boston. 232 total. Chicago, unfortunately here, going to be without Zach LaVine. LaVine out for personal reasons. Let's get LaVine. Let's make sure we can get LaVine out of Chicago. Would be nice. Yeah, S&P. That's the tricky part with the Wizards. They have been really consolidating this rotation, and it makes it kind of tricky to project them. Because the minutes are good from time to time. But for the Bulls, we got a Q tag on Kobe White. who, basically just got himself back. I got to take a sip of this. But yeah, no Levine for this one. Also, no ownership. They are 14% owned. They are the second lowest owned team behind the Brooklyn Nets. And maybe that looks a little bit different. If Kobe White ends up out, maybe we can give enough minutes to Patrick Williams to make him look like a better value play. But they probably, their bench guys always play 16 minutes. Vooch doesn't look very good at 8,500. He's 1% owned. Nobody's more than 4% owned. That's Lonzo Ball, rather. I gave Dosunmu 32 minutes. He looks pretty unappealing. The problem here is the massive pace down spot for the Bulls. They lose 4 possessions below their average in this matchup. The Bulls are the 3rd fastest team in the league. Boston is 26th in pace. So I hate Chicago here. I don't think they look very good. They've got the 2nd lowest optimal rate for me. They've got the 3rd lowest boom rate. Can you get to one of the starters? A Vooch, a Giddey, a Dosunmu? Sure. If White ends up out, do we get to Patrick Williams? Probably a little bit. But I don't really want to get much of this Chicago Bulls team here in a pretty terrible spot against the Boston Celtics. But the Boston side might look interesting, depending on how their injury news breaks. Sam Hauser is questionable. Al Horford is questionable. And Jason Tatum is questionable. Now, clearly, if Tatum's out, you get a lot more Jaylen Brown. Everybody looks better. If Horford's out, Cornette becomes available. Hauser's just a bench dude. So we've got 10% ownership coming into Tatum right now. I would argue a little low, but with the Q tag, it makes some sense. And then Jaylen Brown, 7,600. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. But nice little pace up spot for Boston. Jaylen Brown coming in at 20% owned. I agree with it. 15% optimal, 30% boom, and that's with Tatum in. He'll look even better if Tatum ends up out. I mean, Jaylen Brown for 7,600, if Tatum happens to be out, is going to be a huge play today. But everybody else doesn't look very good. I mean, 5% ownership to Drew, to Peyton Pritchard, to Porzingis. That's where I think it should be. I think the only 2 names that you could realistically click on for Boston are Tatum and Brown. And we won't even know if we have Tatum. I would argue that it feels like he's going to be out. But as I look at it, it's Tatum and Brown. Tatum under-owned, Brown properly owned. But we're going to need the news here. KP's just not playing enough. They've stepped on Derek White and Drew Holiday's minutes at this point. So those guys don't look all that appealing. But maybe it looks a little bit more appealing if all 3 of these guys end up out. But we're ranking at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum here. My new drink is so good. Finally figured out what I wanted to do. So I've got a pack of Element so I can get my electrolytes, fill that in there. I also throw in a pack of orange Gatorade Zero powder. Oh, it's so good. So good. All right, let's get to game number 5. We'll cross the halfway point. That's going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. 7-point favorites in Miami, 227 total. And we don't have too much to talk about. Karis LeVert still out. Isaac Okoro still out. Dean Wade going to be out for a bit. Even with those 3 guys out, 10% ownership to Darius Garland, 10% ownership to Ty Jerome, no ownership to anybody else. I think it's pretty clear Garland is your best option. 7,500, point guard only. He got that 10% ownership, 22% boom. You're looking for 46.5 fantasy points out of Garland. To me, he's the most likely Cav to succeed here. Massive pace down spot, though, for Cleveland. Miami, ultra slow. I don't find Jared Allen to be all that appealing. Evan Mobley's still playing 30 minutes a night. He doesn't look great. Donovan Mitchell is just uninteresting at 8,400. He's just properly priced. Max Strus is fine if you get 30 minutes, but you don't have to. Merrill's in the rotation, Jalen Tyson, George Niang. The Ty Jerome ownership seems a little high at 4,400, but he's a 5%er, probably the second best option on the team. But to me, it's Garland and very little else. And even that doesn't look that great. Cleveland's just good, and they just don't need to bury these guys in minutes. And so many other teams are just going to get that playing time. But if I'm ranking Cleveland, it's Garland 1 and then grab bag after that. Yeah, Max Strus revenge narrative, I guess, is available here. I'm sure he's pretty happy to be in Cleveland at this point. I would imagine he is. Now, the Miami side, obviously Jimmy Butler, not available here for the Heat. Jaime Jaquez is probable. Hero is available. Duncan Robinson's available. We're getting 20+% ownership to Kel'el Ware. We're getting 10 to Jaime Jaquez. And we're getting very limited ownership here for the rest of Miami. Ware looks fantastic at 6,200. He's playing massive minutes. I mean, he's playing more than Bam, which is crazy to think about. But the price works. Center only sucks a little bit, but I think Kel'el Ware looks a lot better than Jalen Duren does at a similar price tag. I got Ware 16% optimal, 36% chance of 40 fantasy points. Ware is a bit of a priority, even in a very interesting mirror matchup against the Cleveland front court. But he deserves his ownership. I'd argue Jaquez is a little, he doesn't strike me as a double-digit guy. I'd be a little bit more interested in Nikola Jovic, more so than Jaime Jaquez. Jovic is power forward, center eligible, 5,300. Jovic, slightly better per minute guy. I would expect Jovic to also play more minutes. Now, he is a couple $100 more expensive, but I have Jovic grading out as a better option than Jaquez. But to me, it's mostly just Ware. You want a random share of Hero or Bam or Jovic, I think it's okay. But I don't want to prioritize too much here. We got to remember, this is a difficult matchup against Cleveland, especially when Mobley and Allen are both healthy. All right, before we get to game number 6, you guys see the banner on the top of the screen? You can get a week of Portfolio EV for free if you've never signed up for it before. If you're interested in pick'em sites or sports books, this is what you're looking for. We've got the best tool in the industry for sports betting and pick'em. We take a market-based approach to beating the books. We give you expected value and expected win rate on all of the props across all the sports. Full record tracking as well. You could query all of our results database to find out the plays that work best for you. We've got parlay builders, odds boost calculators, all of the trend data that you could potentially want to look at. You're shopping around different books, mass entry as well. You could test it all out for a week. No cost to you whatsoever. To me, this is the way that you guys want to slowly build a bankroll. These aren't going to be massive wins. It's going to be incremental victories. And you could build out a bankroll a little bit in the sports betting and pick'em side, then use those winnings to fund your lottery tickets in larger field GPPs on the DFS end. I think sports betting and pick'em and the Portfolio EV tool are taking the place of cash games. This is going to be a way to guarantee yourself a little bit more. I don't want to say guarantee, but to give yourself a little bit of a bankroll booster by using it. So link in the description, click it and sign up. 1 week free if you've never used it before. Game 6, Denver, 3-point dogs in New York, 239 total. Steven's asking if they like Ware at the 5, could they trade Bam to get something? Now, I think this is what they want. I think they want it to be like Cleveland. I think it's the exact opposite. This is what they've wanted at the 4 and the 5, if Ware is what they're getting. I think this is a goal. I mean, they could get just about anything they want for Bam, but no, you don't trade Bam in this scenario. You go to both of those guys. You hope you get some assets for Butler if you can. All right, Nuggies. Nuggies are 3-point dogs in New York, 239 total. Highest total on today's slate. Denver at full strength. Knicks, Q-tag Josh Hart, otherwise at full strength. We're getting about 15% ownership to Jokic and about 20 to Westbrook. I would argue that both of those numbers are like a hair high, but it's Jokic. He's 12-3. He's center only. 25% chance at 70. I mean, like, yeah, he looks good, and paying up for him is not going to be hard. We have more than enough value to be able to get to Nikola Jokic. And I have no qualms clicking that name, particularly in this matchup where he should absolutely thrive. Westbrook, I would argue, at 20% owned is definitely a little too highly owned, but the minutes are there, the role is there, the price is fine. Him going to New York at least just sounds fun on paper. So I don't have much of an issue getting to Westbrook. I think Westbrook looks like the best Denver option, him and Jokic. After that, the problem really is that, like, I don't think Murray, Porter, and Brown look all that different. I really don't. But yeah, pay up for Jokic. Maybe not my priority pay up, but a great pay up. And then, any combination of Westbrook, Murray, Porter, Brown looks fine. I would argue Westbrook's a little overowned compared to the rest of Denver, but he is the best option here. Christian says someone's taking Beal. Well, yeah, someone would take Beal. The question is, does Beal want to go to where he could be traded to? The most important part of this conversation is whether or not Bradley Beal wants to go to that team. Because if he doesn't want to go, he simply just doesn't have to. And he has no incentive to do so. So, like, the problem for Beal is location more than the contract. I'm going to be very surprised if Beal ends up moving. It just doesn't feel like it's going to happen, but I don't know. I think Jimmy Butler is going to end up in Sacramento. That's my current guess. It's the only one that really makes sense to me. It all comes down to whether or not Butler would re-sign there and if they would want to re-sign him. See, like, yes and no, John. Like, I think that he could end up in a bunch of places. They just aren't good teams. I think somebody would soak that salary up for picks. But he's just not going to want to go there. Josh, do you think that the Kings will trade Fox? Yeah, it seems like that's going to have to happen. I could see that being in the offseason, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens before the break. Right now, San Antonio has enough salary to make it happen. Trade deadline's going to be fun, man. I'm pumped for it. I cannot wait. It's so soon. We got what, like 9 days, 10 days or something? I think it's the 8th. Oh, and don't forget, I will be live for multiple hours on trade deadline day, breaking it all down. More than anything, I am fascinated to find out what the Thunder do. The Thunder are the team that I'm watching the most. All right, let's keep going here. Let's get to the Knicks. New York Knicks, Josh Hart questionable. This is the same thing we do every every day. The starting five looks fine. Towns and Brunson are the ones getting ownership. They're 15% owned. That looks completely reasonable to me. I'd say I like Brunson slightly more than I like Towns just because of the position. Josh Hart looks a bit underowned. Anunoby looks a little bit underowned. Bridges looks a little bit underowned. Other than that, it's the same Knicks team we're always going to talk about. So if Josh Hart is out, play a little bit more McBride, play a little Achua. Otherwise, there's not much here. It's just Brunson and Towns and the starters. If San Antonio gets Fox, where do you think CP3 lands? One of two options. Either they reroute him to a place that he would want to be, like they reroute him to the Lakers or something like that, or he just stays and, you know, they keep him as the backup for the rest of the year, which I could see him potentially wanting to do. I don't know how CP feels about being there or not, but they don't have to trade him in that deal if they don't want to. But I could see him potentially getting bought out and ending up in like a city that he wants to end up in. Yeah, S&P, look, like if they get Jimmy Butler, if they can turn DeMar DeRozan into Jimmy Butler, like the Kings get better in that scenario. The real question would be, what can they turn Fox into? NBA fan. No, I don't think they'd have to give up Vassell or Castle. It would be, assuming they would want to do it for picks, and it kind of depends on what the Kings want back too, which probably brings a third team in. But the Spurs would be doing a pretty pick-heavy deal. Zach Collins contract. I could see Harrison Barnes being involved. There's probably another salary that I'm forgetting about on that team. Oh, Keldon Johnson. But no, I would be very surprised if they got rid of Castle or Vassell. All right, let's get to game number 7 here. There's just not much to talk about for the Knicks. John C says he thinks OKC lands Cam Johnson at the deadline. For the Dunked On podcast, it's Nate Duncan, Danny LaRue, Dan Feldman, and Kevin Pelton. They did their trade deadline pod. Oh, God, it's so good. A couple hours worth of it. Whoever was representing the Thunder ended up trading for Kobe White and Cam Johnson. They gave up like Isaiah Joe and Wiggins and all of their other salaries and a bunch of picks. But good God, would they be good for that? I would love those two deals. Could Fox go to Brooklyn? No. No, he cannot. Well, speaking of the Sacramento Kings, they're 8-point favorites in Philadelphia tonight, 228 total. Now, we're getting about 10% ownership to Keegan Murray, and then about 15 to Sabonis, DeRozan, Fox, and Monk. That's pretty commonplace at this point. We're kind of used to what we're getting out of Sacramento here. Philly, the third slowest team in the league, so pretty big pace down spot for the Kings. But any one of those starters, they all play like 33 to 36 minutes. Christian Markkanen can't get traded. 0% chance, can't be traded at all. All this ownership makes perfect sense to me. Sabonis plays a ton. There's no real centers on the Philly side. Sabonis looks awesome. Could have 20 rebounds today. For 6,500 at small forward, DeRozan looks good. Should be 15% owned. Fox should be 15% owned. Monk, to me, always feels like a little over-owned, but totally reasonable with the MPE. Point guard, shooting guard, 7,200. Keegan Murray should be 10% owned. Every once in a while, you get like Keon Ellis falling into minutes. I don't know how you try to do it, but I could understand it. Any one of those starters. If I'm ranking the starters, it's DeRozan, Fox, Murray, Sabonis, Monk. But across the board, the starting five looks good. They're like a way better version of the Knicks starting five for today. But Sacramento starters look really good. I mean, that's 4 guys with 20+% booms. I'm in for that, man. Big time. Now, then we get to Philly. Now, Philly, we can't really talk about. They're the only team on today's slate on a back-to-back, I believe. Yes. So we don't have their injury report. We don't know the status of Yabu. We don't know the status of Drummond. I'm sure we're not getting Paul George or Joel Embiid, so we don't have to worry about that. Maxey looks like a 10 to 15% owned guy. Oubre looks like a 10 to 15% owned guy. Justin Edwards looks like a 10 to 15% owned guy. But we need injuries. We need status. We need injury report. Council's at 4,500. Probably going to be tough to get him. It's probably going to be Edwards. Gordon's value doesn't look all that good today. But I don't know. We need the news. Yabu will be rosterable, I guess, but even in 30 minutes doesn't look very good. But if Drummond's gone, then who knows? But you'll be able to get 10 to 15% of Maxey and 10 to 20 of Oubre, and they will be the priorities. But we need the injury report. We really do. It's hard to break these guys down. But I'm assuming Edwards looks better than Council for most of the day. If we get the same sort of lineup and rotation from the Sixers today that we got yesterday. Now, whether or not we do get that, I don't know. But I'm expecting we get a similar run out of Edwards and Council that we got yesterday. I mean, Lowry and Jackson were both off the bench first for Council, but not expecting to have Lowry here, so we should see a couple extra minutes for Ricky Council. Game number 8 features the Dallas Mavericks. 2-point favorites in New Orleans, 230 total. Mavs are a little tricky today. We have some injury news to wait on. Najee Marshall is questionable for this one. We haven't seen him in a bit. But what's really interesting, and no Derek Lively, no Maxi Kleba, no Luka, no Powell. Dante Exum is doubtful. He has been out for basically the entire year. He had wrist surgery, but he's doubtful. So I'm guessing we're going to get Dante Exum back in the next week or two. That'll be really helpful for Dallas, who's shorthanded right now. Dallas is unowned. These next 4 teams we're basically not going to talk about. Single digit across the board for Dallas. Highest owned guy is PJ Washington at 7%. I didn't get anybody higher than 7% optimal, which was Najee Marshall if he's in, and PJ Washington. It's a pace down spot for Dallas. All of these guys have seen their salaries come up now with these guys being out. Gafford's 7,400 already. There's no meat left on that bone. Grimes and Clay all play like 26 minutes a night. Like Dinwiddie's pretty uninteresting. I don't think Kyrie's all that interesting at 9K. Dallas is mostly a cross-off. I hate both of these 8 o'clock games. They all have... Listen to the optimals and boom rates and ownership on these final 2 games. Ownership, 27%, 16%, 21, 15. Optimal, 37, 37, 35, 34. Boom, 79, 74, 73, 70. These guys are all the same, and they're all just completely uninteresting. Pelicans. No Ingram, no Herb Jones. DeJounte's probable. Zion's in. 4% ownership to DeJounte Murray is the highest of anybody on the Pels. I've got Trey Murphy at 8. He's 2. Zion, 6% optimal, 3% owned. What do you go here? What do you do here for the Pels? How do you go to these guys? Nothing looks good. Nothing looks good. The prices on their 4 main guys are all probably too high. None of them look like good per minute guys. I don't have a single guy at 5x's salary for the Pelicans. So this is another team where I don't even see the late swap angle for getting to more Pelicans. If you want to play somebody, it's one of the 4 main dudes, but my guess is we don't play much. And similarly, we're not going to play much in this final game either. LA Clippers, 3.5-point favorites in San Antonio, 222 total. Clippers still have no Chris Dunn. Otherwise, they're at full strength. 7% ownership to Ivica Zubac is the highest we have on DraftKings. I had him 6% optimal. Nobody got to 20% boom. 7% optimal for Amir Coffey, who's a 0.64 fantasy point per minute guy. There's no ownership here. There's no priorities here. Nobody looks good here. They're all 5%ers. That's it. There's absolutely nothing of note. Listen to these optimal rates for their 6 main guys. 5, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5. Pass. Now, we did see Kawhi get to 28 minutes last time out. Something to keep in mind. I went 27, but he's 6,900. So what can you do? There's just nothing here for the Clippers. And there's nothing here for San Antonio either. 2% ownership to Wemby. He's 11,100, center only. Could he have a big day? Of course. I don't think he looks as good as Jokic. You got guys like Towns on the slate that I think look better. Sabonis, to me, looks better. We're getting 10% ownership to Devin Vassell. I agree with it. I'm 12% optimal, 20% chance at 40 fantasy points. To me, Vassell's the only guy you click on from San Antonio. Maybe you get a couple shares of a 6K Chris Paul, but it's not a priority. These last 4 teams, the 8 o'clock games, unless we get some injury news, none of it looks good. Here are my contenders for today, folks. Josh Okogie in at the number 1 spot. RJ Barrett, 2. Kel'el Ware, 3. Moussa Diabate, 4. Jaylen Brown, 5. Jordan Poole, 6. Jason Tatum, 7. DeMar DeRozan, 8. Tyrese Maxey, 9. And Kelly Oubre coming in that number 10 spot. On the FanDuel side here for everybody, Nick Smith in at number 1. Vasily Micic in at number 2. RJ Barrett, Jason Tatum, and Jordan Poole round out the top 5. Jaylen Brown, Cade Cunningham, Miles Bridges, Tyrese Maxey, and Josh Okogie round out the rest of my FanDuel top 10. Ooh, man, this is a slate that we are going to have when we start the deeper dive from 5 o'clock until 8 o'clock. You are going to be getting the best in the business. 3 straight hours of heavy NBA coverage. That's where we're at for today, folks. Fun Wednesday in the books. Please hit that like button if you haven't done it yet. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, sign up for Portfolio EV, follow me on Twitter. Check us out later tonight at 5 o'clock. 3 straight hours of live coverage between the deeper dive, live before lock, and live after lock on playback. Good luck tonight, everybody. Thank you for being here. I will talk to you guys later.